Welcome to episode 15 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. I am your co-host Sean, here with Sam. Sam, how is your Sunday afternoon?
It's shaping up really well. My fantasy football team is performing for the first time in several weeks, and I am about to head out to Henry Ford's Greenfield Village holiday nights.
Oh, nice.
Getting into, we are talking about Renaissance fairs. Greenfield Village is similar to a Renaissance fair. It is somebody's fantasy.
Interesting take. We have part 2 of our entertainment series on Renaissance fairs. Last week, in episode 14, we were joined by Ren band Skepper Monkeys. And this week, we are joined by a Michigan Renaissance Festival band called Wakefire. So in general, yeah, we were very lucky to have 2 bands come on. Irish music in general, do you like it?
Is that a question to me?
Yeah. No, it's a question to...
I don't know if it's like a rhetorical question to the audience, because if you don't like it, then stop listening now. Yeah, no, I like Irish music.
This episode is not for you.
Yeah. I like Irish music. I mean, I've said this in prior episodes too. I like some of the more traditional stuff, what would be recreating music from Tudor era, Elizabethan, the Renaissance era music. In the interview, you mentioned Gregorian chants. I actually listen to Gregorian chants when I'm doing focus work or when I was in school and I was doing homework or reading. Just because it's a really easy way to, I think I found it to be both kind of inspiring focus, but also somewhat relaxing.
Yeah, so you listen to Gregorian chants. I listen to Mongolian throat singing. Speaking of Mongolian throat singing, Betsorg Vonchig, if you want to listen to him, he is, to me, the best Mongolian throat singer in the market. So just throwing that out there. But I digress from our main topic, which is Wakefire and Renaissance Fair entertainment. In part 1, we got most of our Ren Fair discussion out in the realm of entertainment. So I don't think we need to add any more of our fluff to it. Do you feel like just getting right into the interview?
Yeah, why don't let's jump into the interview, and then maybe we can come back afterward and kind of have our maybe summarizing thoughts about both of the interviews and just reflecting a little bit back on some common themes in the interviews that we had with these 2 bands.
Okay, well, here's the interview with Wakefire. We just wanted to say welcome to Wakefire, our newest Ren Fair band that has so graciously agreed to come on to the podcast and talk to us about Ren Fair music, Irish music, Celtic music, and just Ren Fairs in general. So thank you all for joining us. And if you could go around and introduce yourselves and what you do in the band, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Nessa. I am one of the lead vocalists. Everybody sings, but I guess I take on a few more songs than many other people. And I play some hand percussion instrument, bones, shaky egg, tambourine, things like that.
Hi, I am Sarah. I am the tin whistler and flutist, and I do sometimes sing a little bit as well.
Hey there, I am Bubba Wilson, and I am the mandolinist and keyboardist for Wakefire. I also occasionally end up picking up the guitar or bass, and also sing lead on a couple songs nowadays.
And do you have any other band members who were not able to make it on? Just to give them a shout out as well.
We definitely
do.
Yeah. Our other lead vocalist and lead guitarist, Jared Cohn, wasn't able to make it. Russ Turner plays bass and does a little bit of singing as well, and he wasn't able to make it. And our divine drummer, the maestro himself, Michael Padlow, is busy today as well. So the 3 of us you get us instead.
Well, that is definitely enough for Sam and I. As we go forward, I'll start with the first question, and then Sam and I will kick it back and forth as we go through. But our first question, just to get an idea of how does a band get into Ren Fair? How does the band even begin? So if you could tell us your origin story on how Wakefire came to be.
It's such a long and winding tale, though. I mean, let's see, Jared joined the Michigan Renaissance Festival when he was 16 years old and sort of worked his way up from lowly rock farmer on cast at the Renaissance Festival to playing in some pubs with a smaller band, with a smaller group. And that group seemed to change every year, both in name and in personnel, until, let's see, we were born right after they were extra for a year, right?
Yes.
That sounds right.
It was me and Russ and Jared and a couple of other folks who are no longer in the band. And we have also traded out a few people, but Wakefire, at least the name Wakefire, has stuck around for the past 5 years. So that's how we ended up getting into the band, getting into the Michigan Renaissance Festival as a band. Is I think Jared's just been sort of there since he was a kid.
Russ has too. Russ has a long history playing in Renaissance Festival bands. He's played with a couple of other ones. I think the Body Boys was the longest. He was a brief stint with them, and then with a couple of other. The Village Idiots, I think, was the longest running one.
Yeah, exactly.
And is it easy as a band to get into the Ren Fair, or do you have to wait for a band to decide that they don't want to be in it anymore, and then there's an open spot, or is it easier to get in?
I guess to answer that question, I can sort of talk about how I got into it, because I am not nearly as long standing and performing at Renaissance festivals. I was a patron at Renaissance festivals for many, many years, ever since I was a very little child. But I'll tell you, one of the best ways, if anyone's ever interested in getting into a Michigan Renaissance Festival, into not only the Michigan Renaissance Festival, but any Renaissance Festival, is talk about it, make friends. Because I made friends with a band called Black Murray, who are out there, and they were awesome, awesome friends. And we just started talking, and then as time went on, it made sense. But we actually met because I was a musician, and they needed a substitute guitar player for a performance at the Renaissance Festival. And from there, I made friends with a lot of other musicians. So I would say if it's like, how do I get into performing at Renaissance festivals? It's talk to people who are performing at Renaissance festivals. And chances are, if you make a good impression and you're talented and charismatic and fun and kind, then they will always vouch for you, because these jobs do come up often. It depends on the year, but there are often openings at Renaissance festivals for performers. I don't think I've ever really seen a Renaissance festival. Well, I guess as of late, there have been a lot of opportunities for new performers and new entertainers to get into Renaissance festivals. The need and the hunger for new entertainment and acts is as in demand now as it's ever been.
Yeah, I think the pandemic sort of forced a lot of people into early retirement, or forced them to stop traveling to various Renaissance festivals. And that means we honestly have like a lot of stage openings. So there are auditions for like cast at the Renaissance Festival. And like, that's how I got into doing Renaissance festivals, is I auditioned for cast and ended up getting into like auditioning up into a madrigal singing group, an all women's madrigal singer quartet. But yeah, you can audition to get in on cast. You can also send your CV to the entertainment director, and you can find that on Michigan Renaissance Festival website, and say, hey, we've got this act or this band or this group, and we'd like to play on a stage, and here's all our info. I mean, and if you're really good, then you absolutely have a shot.
It does help to know people too, because when they are looking for new entertainment, if they're looking to add new groups, places, we've been asked, occasionally, hey, do you know of another group that might be a good fit on this stage or at this festival? And we're happy to recommend folks that we know, other bands we've worked with who we know are really capable and brilliant musicians and lovely people, and it really helps to know people, honestly, like Baba said.
I have a question before I get into the assigned question, Sean, which is, did you all learn the various instruments that you played growing up? Did you learn any of them kind of in response to seeing a need that the band wanted to fill, some of the songs that you wanted to play? How did your various mix of musical instruments come about?
Yeah.
I think we all have different answers. So go ahead, Bubba.
Yeah, I guess I'll kick this off with, which is probably one of the more entertaining answers, which is before I met the members of Black Murray, I was a blues guitarist. I played blues and funk and like classic pop and classic rock in a bar band, effectively. I was a front man, I was a singer, and I played electric guitar, and I wore tight pants and funny little vests, doing my best to just be a gigging bar musician. And I was working at a guitar shop when I met the members of Black Murray, and they needed a guitarist for a fill-in gig. And then as time went on, they needed a mandolinist. And I didn't know how to play the mandolin. They're like, well, if you could play mandolin or banjo or any of these sort of, Irishy, pubish sort of, acoustic instruments, we could offer you a job. So I put my nose to the stone and learned mandolin as quickly as I possibly could to where I could at least get by. And so, no, I played piano since I was a wee lad, but mandolin is a relatively contemporary addition to my repertoire. But thanks to Renaissance festivals and a love for this music and a love for this community and opportunity, I would now consider myself a mandolinist before I would consider myself a guitarist.
Nice.
Which is something, if you would have told me 5 years ago, I would have laughed in your face.
Nice.
Yeah, he is a top-rate mandolinist. Like, you got to see him play.
Well, thank you.
See, I've owned a mandolin for about 2 years. I got one during the pandemic. For some reason, it's just so hard for me to come by. I played saxophone for a while, and I thought, you have an idea of how an instrument works, but yeah, mandolin, I just can't get past something.
At this point, it's just a prop in his bard costume for
it is,
Ren
yeah.
Fair.
When I go to Ren Fair, like I said with Scupper Monkeys, I might need to take the strings out of it just so people don't ask me to play it. But
yeah, I also happen to work at a music shop, and every time a mandolin customer walks in like, "Hi, I'd like to buy my first mandolin," I get so excited because there are not enough mandolin players. I've learned that by how many substitute opportunities I've been given as a mandolinist. About 5 or 6 different bands in Southeast Michigan say, "Hey, we've got a gig coming up and our mandolinist can't make it. Can you make it?" And and it's just one of those
job
things,
security.
Oh, it's great. It's the same thing for accordion players and bagpipe players, or when I was young, I would think about like, oh, what can I get into that will make me the best at something that no one else is good at? And I was like, oh, I'll play, I will be a very young person playing very ancient music. I'll be the 17-year-old playing blues. No one else will be able to compete with me on that. And then it became, I'll be the guy that plays the mandolin. just keeping an edge on everything.
Nice. I didn't want to imagine how it came about, but that's a great way for how it's like, we need a mandolin player. Can you do it? Yes.
Yes.
Give me 5 minutes. I got to go learn how to play mandolin real quick.
That's honestly how it goes. Anything we need something new for, we go, Bubba, can you pick this up? And he says, yes, give me 5 minutes. And in 5 minutes, he's mastered the thing.
He does have a legitimate talent for just picking up instruments, so that really helps.
They won't let me touch any more new instruments because they're afraid that I'll learn how to play them.
You will be the band.
Yeah. How about everybody else? What other instruments did you come into Wakefire knowing how to play, and did anybody else pick up ones that were kind of to fill a need that the band saw?
Well, I can tell you that our bassist Russ is primarily a guitarist. And found more opportunities available to him when he picked up the bass. So we see him switch things out now and again, but he's really extraordinary at both of those things. He's been playing them both for a very long time. Jared's primarily a guitarist, but also plays the mandolin, and I know he's self-taught. I am a classically trained flutist, so I went to college for it and everything, and had picked up the tin whistle just for fun. Irish music is something that's been in my family for a long time. I'm about half Irish. And I'd been playing it for about 2 months when I took up with some of the folks from Wakefire in a smaller configuration before I joined the band proper. But that was a pretty natural transition. That was not very difficult for me to pick up at all. So, and Nessa's been a singer forever.
Yeah, I've been a singer since I was like, since I started, school, maybe before that. So I've done various choirs and choral arrangements, and then I joined the Renaissance Festival singing madrigals, which is just like Renaissance era non-church music, basically. I did pick up the bones for the Renaissance Festival. I started that when I joined Pandora Celtica at the Colorado Renaissance Festival ages ago. So I was like, it would be nice to have, something else to add to it, and maybe something to do with my hands while I'm singing and everyone around me is playing their instruments like a pro. So.
And for those of our listeners who don't know what the bones are, what are bones?
Oh yeah, they're
That's
just
go get your bones.
Oh my gosh, they're in my car. They're just they're long pieces. They're little pieces of wood. Sort of maybe. I'd say like 2 finger bones, maybe tied together, and then you just hit them together while you're moving your wrist, and you clack them, and I don't know. You could look it up. They're pretty common in Irish music.
Pretty like straightforward, easy handheld percussion, but something to add.
Easy is not the correct word.
I didn't mean. I meant non. Maybe easier to transport than a large.
You're
like
digging yourself a hole, Sam.
Yeah. all of my delicate musical equipment that I have to carry so difficult, with such difficulty from show to show.
Well, do you guys?
Oh, we missed Padlo. We missed our drummer. He's been a drummer since he was little. Yeah, Bubba knows.
Yeah, you want to talk about another sort of juxtaposed backstory? He played very heavy metal. There are so many subgenres of metal that I dare not even begin to try to guess which one before a horde of individuals ream me for not identifying the correct subgenre. But he played very heavy metal for a very long time, and I was a coworker with him at a music shop, and we were in need of a new drummer. We had parted ways with a drummer, and we needed a new one. And I brought him a coffee one morning while we were at work. I'm like, hey, do you want to play music? He's like, does it make money? I'm like, yeah. He's like, then absolutely. I think he came into it true. I mean, you could ask him. He's made it very clear that he did not expect to fall in love with this style of music or with this environment the way that he did, but he truly has found his own groove to lie in. And when asked, he said he wouldn't leave it for the world.
So that kind of leads me into another question. Just when I think of Ren Fair, and so like I said in the last episode, I've only been going to Ren Fairs for the last 5-6 years. I don't think I anticipated the amount of Irish Celtic music to be played at Ren Fairs. So why do you think there's a connection between that specific genre of music and Ren Fair itself? And that's kind of like an existential question. So
I bet you I have a thought, but I would love to hear the literary sort of history that would come from Sarah and Nessa, because I have an opinion.
Whoa. I have some thoughts about this actually. And some of it is rather pertinent to your usual podcast topic here, which is that in a lot of media, Renaissance festivals are sometimes historical, but these days they have their origins in fantasy, and modern fairs are sort of shifting. At least our fair is shifting back a little bit in that more fantastical direction. A lot of what we associate with some of those historical fantasy ideas, a lot of them come from Tolkien and his contemporaries, and from the modern interpretation of those on film and on television. For some reason, I don't know if it's just because we have a lot of that from English and Irish and sort of Central Eastern Europe writers, authors, and filmmakers. a lot of that music, because it feels old, because it feels traditional and nostalgic and whatnot, has really shaped the sound of what we think of as fantasy. And so, because some of those traditions, those Irish and Scottish and other Celtic music traditions stretch back so far, they feel old, they feel tied to that kind of fantastical idea we have of the past. And I think that's why we see a lot of sort of Irish and Celtic music, especially at Renaissance festivals, that we're looking for that really nostalgic old feel without having to listen to what actual medieval instruments sounded like, which is not nearly as pretty.
I will say 5 years ago, I was anticipating like Gregorian chanting and
Yeah,
probably things that wouldn't fly with a modern fan base.
certainly. No, to piggyback off of what Sarah was going on, my tie was going to be directly to Tolkien. If you think about fantasy and, the tie between fantasy and Renaissance, that the way Tolkien wrote about these fantastical places, when I think, everyone's like, oh, I want to live in the Shire. The Shire is perfect. Peter Jackson crafted the perfect Shire. But when you talk about what Tolkien imagined the Shire to be, it was very much a caricature of posh British living, which often, in order to make posh British living exciting, you would listen to Irish and Scottish music. In the early 1900s, the resurgence of Irish and Scottish folk music in British pubs. If you talk about the Dubliners playing in London and the other parts of the United Kingdom, almost as much as they were playing in Ireland themselves, there's this aesthetic of British fantasy tied directly to the ideal party, which to someone like Tolkien and his contemporaries would be going to an Irish pub. And capturing that and translating it is very easy. And like Sarah mentioned, a lot of the songs we play are not nearly as old as we would like to hope. Songs like the Black Velvet Band and, the Irish Rover. And these are new songs relative to everything else. We actually have to be quite careful sometimes because what we consider like, classic old pub music is not nearly as old as we'd like to think.
No, it feels very traditional, and it's written in those traditional styles, but a lot of it was written in the 40s or written in the 60s, and it feels old because it's written in that older style, or calls back to that older style, but it sometimes causes us issues with copyright.
But good on them for writing what is very hard to do nowadays, which is writing timeless music, keeping your themes so universal that it could feel like it would fit in the 1960s as well as the 1760s or now.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a tie-in to any like Irish nationalism, kind of in the wake of the?
Oh yes,
the first part of it's kind of an assertion of Irish identity, which like there's an interesting manifestation of that in the United States as well, where descendants of Irish immigrants and even people who maybe can't directly trace it, but really identify with that Irish ideal.
Music is very much a part of Irish heritage, and that is a big way in which they expressed themselves, both under harsh English rule and nowadays too, and even English descendant or rather Irish descendants in America do that same thing. I mean, St. Patrick's Day is a huge deal because those people exist and they want to celebrate their identity. And yeah, Irish music, traditional Irish music is really, really good music. And so it just lasts really long and people keep picking it up, and people who are descendants of Irish bloodlines will continue to make more of it.
It's really true. I can speak a little bit to that. Like I said, I'm a bit Irish myself and have been in the Irish community kind of in and around where I live since I was young. And there is a really strong tendency especially for American folks of Irish descent to kind of mythologize a little bit the homeland that they either left or have never been to. Mm-hmm. So it's got some strong ties to both the identity of the folks, I guess the identity that people had when they came here that may not have grown in parallel to where Irish identity for Irish, like people who live in Ireland, is now. But they've grown on a similar track, and so I think there is some appeal to that sort of Irish nationalist streak, even for American Irish folks. I think you're very right about that.
And I would go as far as to say that translates a lot to just the American identity in general, the love of our own heritage. To where if you look at other parts of the world, no one from Britain will ever say, "Oh, I'm Indian," if they weren't born in India. There's something about the melting pot that is America, where we identify, because our country's so young and so new, that we identify almost more frequently with our heritage than our own country, where we were raised, and sometimes where our parents, grandparents, and great grandparents were raised. I can speak to that. I have a lot of Scottish heritage that I'm really proud of, but I'm pretty sure I'm the first individual in my family to be excited about Scottish heritage in 4 generations. But it's something. There's something about following that rabbit hole of where you came from that is unique to the American experience, I think. And I think it translates to a lot of not only our fantasy, but our identity, our pride of who we are and where we come from comes a lot from the fact that we haven't been here for very long. And whether it's Irish or Scottish or African or Caribbean or, anywhere else in the world, carrying that identity with you is this distinctly American flag that we seem to carry with us, that I think is a really cool part of being who we are.
Very well said. One of the very first things we talked about in our coverage of the Lord of the Rings series on Amazon was some of the backlash to the Irish or faux Irish accents that were used in the portrayal of the Harfoots. And I don't know, some of you guys are nodding your heads if you followed that along. Did you have any thoughts on that? Because that was one of the early controversies, and the Irish Times ran a piece, and actually the creators of the show gave the Irish Times an interview because they seemed like it completely caught them by surprise. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think if Jared were here, he would point out that he possibly alone among us has zero Irish heritage whatsoever. He's a good Jewish boy, and because he has red hair, he has striking red hair.
That's like me.
That's your Sam exactly.
He was always mistaken for being Irish, and people, especially at our shows, especially at the Renaissance Festival, where this sort of Anglo and Irish heritage is really treasured, and we've got a lot of nostalgia about it. They're always talking to him, up with the Irish. Yeah, only Irish people on this stage. And he's like, I am not comfortable with that. So yeah, he has taken a stand against using sort of a faux Irish accent for that particular reason. And I feel like people are thinking a lot about appropriating Irish culture and how they use it to sort of signal, people were upset about the Harfoots accents because they were trying to signal that the Harfoots were backwater and, I don't want to say stupid, but not educated. Yeah, and dirty. And that's, if you give that just a tiny bit more thought, that's kind of terrible. So I feel like that's a valid criticism that they need to think about. Whether or not that was their intention, maybe it wasn't their intention, and I can totally see that just having gotten out of hand. But it's something that we have to think about now, because we live in the world now where people are aware of these racial stereotypes, and we're not trying to hurt anybody. We're not trying to criticize anybody. So.
That in particular, it really is one of those double-edged blades, right? It is a damned if, with Tolkien in particular, but it translates to any fantasy. It is a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because one of the great defenses of, we're using this is because these are descendants of hobbits, and in Peter Jackson's portrayal of the Shire, they used a lot of Northern English and Irish accents in that direction. The voice of Samwise Gamgee, it almost solely seems like the inspiration for the accents that the Harfoots use. Good Lord, who played Samwise? But anyway, Sean Astin. Yeah. Sean Astin's performance of Samwise was the pinnacle of what it meant to be a Hobbit, and with the Harfoots being that, it's like, okay, this is a natural, an easy decision if you're thinking very quickly. But like Nessa said, we are in the larger world, and making sure that we're being delicate. One thing I would like to praise is where they make a misstep, they did something bold that I think was to the benefit of the writing in the show, which is how they sort of elaborated on Dwarvish culture. Because if you look at Dwarvish culture, you can praise Tolkien or not, but it is really hard to remove the historically Jewish caricature from the early writing of dwarves. Maybe not even the late writing of dwarves by Tolkien. He even may have made some changes as his life went on. But if you look at his early, very simple writings about dwarves, it was rough. But then to have the Amazon show go in and elaborate on, the more fun and interesting, and still not changing what dwarves are and could be in a fantasy setting, but just elaborating on it, making it more than just, a 2-sentence introduction to what dwarves are. It's like, oh, in 2 sentences, I know everything about what dwarves are and what their culture is, which was one of the shortcomings of The Hobbit, which was a children's book, but as time has gone on, we've begun to analyze much more maturely.
The dwarves are interesting because I'm going back through Lord of the Rings right now, and I was reading the chapter where the 4 hobbits are at the Inn of the Prancing Pony, and they get the letter from Gandalf, and he signs it with the rune for G, meaning Gandalf, but it's very much like it looks completely inspired by the Hebrew alphabet, which I know Tolkien did for the dwarves language. And mentioned, I'm a redheaded Jew, also have Scottish ancestry on part of my family. Or at least we think they're Scottish. There's actually coming out, it might be Welsh technically, but it's interesting that the modern stereotypical portrayal of dwarves in fantasy are basically these very Scottish inspiration, right? With the brogue and the red hair and all of that. You look at the inspiration. Yeah, Tolkien was very much inspired by the story of kind of the Jews being a people without a land, and kind of this quest to reclaim the Lonely Mountain, and some of the other aspects of their portrayal were inspired by the Jews in Tolkien's experience. But yeah, it's where do you think that that expression or the portrayal of dwarves as being Scottish comes from? Because that seems like a relatively newer
Peter
thing.
Jackson.
I think lately Vikings have been very popular, and I think honestly, it's just the popularity of that sort of visual of dwarves as Vikings that sort of has led it to more of a Scottish style. But also, like, oh gosh, the guy who played Gimli,
John Rhys Davies.
Yeah. Again, with Samwise as the perfect hobbit, Rhys Davies was pretty much the perfect dwarf, and he had that Scottish accent down, so it was pretty good. It was a pretty natural lead-in. I'd like to point out that, like, the Michigan Renaissance Festival is sort of like trying to move in that direction as well, where we're moving away from a historical bent, which a lot of historical bents can be sometimes whitewashed history. And I think Renaissance festivals in America have never been an exception to that rule. There's always been sort of a whitewashed history surrounding the Renaissance Festival, and and the characters that they portray, and the things that they think about, and the things that they don't think about. The Michigan Renaissance Festival is going in a more fantasy fair direction nowadays, I think in an attempt, in part, to embrace a more multi-ethnic, just a broader section of society than otherwise may have felt comfortable going to a Renaissance festival. And so that's kind of neat. I see them doing that in the Lord of the Rings TV as well. So
yeah, I was just gonna say, that's one of the great things about fantasy, is that we're not bound by anyone's intention or anything. It's ours. We get to do what we want with it, and so to do the right things with it that make sure more people are having fun is always a benefit. But you were saying, Sarah?
Yeah, one of the particular challenges that Renaissance festivals in general are facing, part of it comes from the fact that Tolkien especially was so influential in shaping what high fantasy looks like to people. But he himself had while he did extensive research, beautiful, complicated, lengthy research into how he wanted to portray the world he was creating, all of it's drawn from the world as it was around him. And people have gotten very rigid about portraying things in that same way. But it means that a lot of our fantasy has historically been kind of confined to the worldview that he had. it has colored the way that that's developed forward up until now. And I think trying to branch out from that particular worldview and be more inclusive of people, and not basing our fantasies solely in what the world looked like to a British man however many years ago, it's challenging to do. It's hard to pull it out from that established pattern of portraying fantasy people with caricatures of existing people, and to pull it into a more, I don't know, I guess modern and all-encompassing idea of who all of these people are or can be, to kind of remove those limits is where we're at now. And I'm excited to see things moving in that direction, both on screen for some of these newer ideas of derivations of Tolkien's work, and in places like Renaissance festivals, so that everybody does get to see themselves in that fantasy world. It's a really cool direction to be moving in.
Absolutely. You've kind of put your thumb on the ethos of our podcast, which is that fantasy is for everybody. So that's, we talked about that in the Lord of the Rings show. We've covered Vox Machina. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Critical Role and Vox Machina, but so like such a wonderful portrayal of a diversity in a fantasy setting. Obviously there it's, all over the place with different skin colors, but different, I think that opening scene in the bar in episode 1, you had all this huge diverse panoply of characters all interfacing. Like that's what fantasy can be. And we're going to see, I think they just announced some additional casting for season 2, and we see additional, adding more diversity to the voice actors, continuing on with that. So yeah, you've put your thumb on it. And if that's the direction that Renaissance fairs are going, then, all the better. But we are, yeah. So, sorry, Nessa, you going to say something?
No, I was just agreeing. I really hope that it continues to be the direction that we're going in as well.
Man, we got way more philosophical than I was anticipating.
Yeah, that was not what I expected.
And it turned back into a Tolkien podcast once more.
Yeah, it did.
Hey, he's still the granddaddy of it all, I guess.
Yeah. To now have a question that is much less philosophical and a little bit more bland. Why do you enjoy performing at Ren Fairs? I know when I was on your website, I saw you also play at the Irish Festival. I'm assuming come St. Patrick's Day, like Scupper Monkeys, you guys will be booking some bars. But why Ren Fairs in particular?
I have always just loved the atmosphere at Ren Fair. It's like I joined the Renaissance Festival when I was 19, like my first summer away from home, and it immediately felt like home to me. A bunch of nerdy folks. We got to dress up in awesome outfits and play at being royalty or proper ladies or elves or dwarves or something other than we really felt like in our day-to-day, especially as a teenage girl growing up in Colorado, for me personally. And it was fantastic, and I made amazing friendships there. It would be really hard to turn down working at the Renaissance Festival. Like even as we get bigger, if we eventually outgrow working at the Renaissance Festival as a band, like if we start getting bigger gigs around that same time, it would be really hard to let go of the Renaissance Festival just because of the real joy that we have found with those people. And gosh, with the other actors and the other musicians who we share stages with there, we have really developed some really good friendships. And it would be incredibly hard to leave it. And I think that's why we keep coming back year after year. It's just way too much fun. Plus, it's like getting to go and play fantasy games on the weekend, for 7 weekends every year. It's pretty nice, and get paid for it.
For me, being someone who went to Renaissance festivals as a child and only recently, within the past 5 years, began entertaining at them, there's this, and this is a universal feeling that I've found that we can all relate to, which is normal day-to-day often is a drag and a slog. And the moment you walk through the gates of a Renaissance festival, you're inspired to be different, and you're inspired to have fun and to turn your phone off and to have fun with your friends, or to go watch a show, or to laugh, or to see something you've never seen before, or to listen to music you've never listened to. And there are a few mentors to me at the Michigan Renaissance Festival. who really embodied that mentality of our job is less to sing or to dance or to juggle or to do anything or to, enter. And it's more so to help these fantastic people forget for one day that life is real and that they have a job and taxes and bills and responsibilities, and that for one day they can forget that all of that exists. And that's really our job. That's, I play the mandolin, but what I'm actually providing is respite and relaxation. And I've seen it come to tears for people, and it's come to tears for myself as well. Just how one day at a Renaissance festival, if you're willing to embrace it and you're willing to get excited about it, can cure what ails you in so many different ways. And being a part of that in a band, or if Jared's been doing it since he was 16. Even on our worst day where it frustrates us the most and things aren't going right, and at the end of the day, it's a business. If the management doesn't work out in our favor, or if something, for us, the workers, it's not always the fantasy. But once we're up on stage and we see the looks on people's faces and the clapping and the dancing, the things that no one would ever do on a regular Saturday if they were just out at a bar or sitting at home with some friends, that's what does it for me. That's absolutely it.
For me, it's a little bit a chance to get out of the world for a while. It's its whole separate little environment over at festivals, especially at Michigan Renaissance Festival, because it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's a little bit of an opportunity, like Bubba said, to kind of leave the regular world behind for a while. For me, it's also fun I get to be outside all day. I get to play music all day with people I'm very fond of and people I work well with, and I'm glad to be around. I get to hear other extraordinary musicians all day. Nessa mentioned, we have a great number of friends and colleagues there. And it's, you get to see people be in a different version of themselves out of the festival. There are people that I've met there and then I've met outside of the festival, and you don't recognize people at all in those two very different worlds. It's funny, and it happens a lot. And it is a really good chance to get to be kind of whoever you feel like being for the day. And you get to go spend it outside surrounded by, trees and lots of other people being their best selves for the day. And it's a good time.
One thing I really like about the Michigan Renaissance Festival is that walk that you have to make in from the parking. Like, there are a couple parking lots, but there's the one where you have to walk in through the woods. And it really is like, that's where you can kind of shed whoever you were at home or in the car, whoever you might be Monday through Friday. And then you're walking through the woods and it opens up and you can see the gate and the fan, and then you can enter kind of that fantasy world, right? And it really is kind of fitting. And if you have any problems doing that, then get another cup of mead or two.
And actually,
really easy to shift into that immersive environment.
yeah.
And again, sort of citing the first question that we opened up the podcast with, if you're interested in working at a Renaissance festival, I would offer this as a bit of caution. I have seen some incredibly talented people make the misstep of forgetting that sometimes if you want to work at a Renaissance festival, that it is a job. And I've seen some people go into it and realize that it's not for them. I've also seen some people go in there and realize that Renaissance festivals are no longer for them. They've actually broken their own hearts from going from being a patron to being an entertainer or performer or worker, because it is pulling the curtain back on Oz's podium. Sometimes sometimes you don't want to know how the magic's made, and just consider that. I would offer that as a token. Take that with you, because for me, the magic's still there, but it's not for everybody. So if you ever are thinking about I want to work at a Renaissance festival, remember what that means, and remember that your job is no longer to have fun for yourself, but to be the provider of fun for others. And if that doesn't sound fun to you, then it might not be right for you. Make sure that you think of all the things that you would want to do if you want to work at a Renaissance festival. But if that sounds like it, then we'd love to see you there, and we're gonna have a fun time.
Yeah,
it kind of reminds me of
mud.
Yes,
the mud is real. The dust is real.
Oh my God! Sarah still has black lung.
I do.
Sam and I talked in the last episode. Was it 2 years ago when we had that rainstorm right before one of the weekends? And
oh yeah,
every causeway was just 6 inches of muck.
Yep.
We had a lake outside our pub. The mermaids came and sat in it.
They did. That was fun.
Those
It's not
mermaids.
supposed to be a lake. It's supposed to be a path.
Well, it's like the whole site, you've got marshland all around it, right? So it's low lying to begin with, and just a little bit more rain than we're able to absorb, and everything changes. But people have some fun with it, right? You can get into it.
Yeah.
People
Oh, yeah,
all
all
of rain days are excellent sometimes, because that's when the really dedicated people just stick around. And then you've got people playing games in the mud. You've got the sirens sitting in the middle of the lake trying to tempt passing patrons to come and join them in the 1 foot deep water that looks like it might be 2 inches.
And I'm pretty sure none of the Lake Guinness mermaids got tetanus, which is a win.
It is a win.
Well, the good news is you don't have to, you can remain authentic, but still utilize 21st century medicine just in case. There will be no leeching, no Elizabethan cures. Yeah.
Well, we'll close this interview with one final question, just as like a wholesome question to see if you have what's your favorite Ren Fair experience? What's your favorite story? It can be something that's wholesome, like our last band, Ben proposed to his wife outside of the gates, so he had a very wholesome story. But anything wholesome, anything horrific, anything scary that's happened to you, just any story that you find intriguing enough to tell.
I'll go first. And I will start with a story. I was in the band Black Murray, and that band's job was effectively, they were the house entertainment for the Feast of Fantasy in Blackstone Castle. It was an up-ticketed event where you get a 7-course meal, mead and wine and beer, and acts from around the Renaissance Festival during their set breaks would come in and do shortened versions of their set for this dinner crowd. And the way we did it is we had 2 feasts. And then we started the day with a regular sort of pub set right outside of the castle. And then we ended the day with the King's Ale Hour. But it was the final day of the festival, my last season with Black Murray. And it was the first year that Black Murray really made a name for themselves and had set the tone for what the band could be and what they could do. The band is still going on strong, though I have departed. It was we like I said, we would do a set right outside of the castle, but just by turning our equipment sideways. It was the Sunday morning and it was pouring rain, and we had just moved inside, and it was one of those mornings. It's 10:15. The cannon had just blown. People are just starting to come in, but a small handful of very dedicated people who knew it was going to rain all day, who knew it was their last chance to see us, rushed for the castle. And rather than making them sit out in the rain, we set up a couple of benches right there inside of an empty castle and played without plugging in. We just played acoustically, just our voices and our instruments, to this small number of people who we had, grown accustomed to knowing and had become sort of our pals and our regulars who would come see Black Murray. And we had our own goodbye songs that we would often do, and we played a couple of those, and it was all tears and all joy, but it really encapsulated why we do what we do and how much fun we have doing it.
Sarah, do you got anything?
Yeah, I've got one. I think so. There was a pretty major change that's been made at the Michigan Renaissance Festival in the last couple of years, with things like COVID in mind, and knowing how many people attend the festival on a weekend. So we have a pub sing that used to be held all of the time in the pub where we usually play, in the Guinness pub right in the middle of the grounds. But the problem is that stage does not, the space that stage is in doesn't hold all that many people. And so we tended to get, for pub sing, historically, it's been sort of a crowd of regulars, and they'd go and get their seat very early. You'd see them show up for the end of the day pub sing by, 3 or 4 in the afternoon, even though it doesn't close till 7. They'd stay and they'd wait for this final end of the day to sing together, and bands will usually come play a song that the audience knows well, they can sing along with, and things like that. Most of the bands on the ground come and play one song, and we all take turns swapping on and off, and it's an absolute madhouse. It's chaos. It's fun. but it tended to feel very sort of close-knit with lots of regulars and folks who knew each other. My favorite thing that has happened, I think, in the last couple of years is that it has been moved out of the pub and up to one of the big stages close to the front gate. And the reason that I like this so much is that it gives way more people a chance to be part of that very sort of community-oriented, that sort of intimate end of the day thing. So this year, on one of our good sunny weekends, we went up for our turn. And I got to look out from the stage, and instead of a crowd of, 30 people all jammed in close together, elbow to elbow, there was this sea of a few hundred people who had all packed in together to come and see this end of the day thing, to sing together and sort of have their little end of the day sing along and stand around and feel part of the community with their friends. It's a change that I think is really positive, and it gives lots more people a chance to participate in that thing and feel like part of the community.
Yeah, and it's a really big crowd too, and because it's a really big
huge
stage,
now.
we get to play with our other musician friends, because we can fit every band in the Renaissance Festival up on that stage. Fortunately, It's really hard to do at the Guinness Pub. It's very small.
And it's right in the heart too, and you got like your heart up against like the bottom of that with that little thoroughfare which backs up to kind of the marshy area. They really need to kind of like double the size of it, and they could take, what is it, like go all the way up to like the Bloody Mary bar at the top of the hill and like turn that all into the Guinness Pub. It would be great. From
your mouth to the manager's ears, may it be. Come on. That would be
if he's listening, I got a ton more ideas. Let me know.
Let's see. One of my favorite memories is early on when I joined the Michigan Renaissance Festival and Wakefire. I hang out with a friend who does face painting. And first of all, it's lovely to see her face painting, because the little kids, she has them close their eyes so that she can spray glitter on their new face paints. And then she puts a mirror in front of them and says, okay, now you can open your eyes. And every single time they just go, wow, and they get this huge smile, and that in and of itself is like a reason to hang out with her. But on rain days, when all the kids go home so that they don't get wet and muddy, I just sit in her shop and we write Wakefire fan fiction on archive.
Oh my god, you can't do this.
I can in public on a podcast. We totally do, and it's so much fun. And it's like, it's probably one of my favorite memories, is just sitting and writing this silly, incredibly silly fan fiction with her, and then occasionally reading it to members of the band and watching them just like laugh, cry. It's pretty great. We have a lot of really funny material that we make at the Renaissance Festival, so it's fun to write some of it down.
Well, that's great. Thank you for the stories. It's a great way to end it. Sam, do you have any last things you want to say?
No, just I guess thank you all for coming, and we will look for you next summer. But in between then and now, where can we find you? Where can our listeners find you? What's the best way to get more Wakefire in their lives?
Ooh, well, you can find us on our website, first of all, wakefiremusic.com. We've got our 4 albums on there, as well as a whole bunch of other merchandise, t-shirts and hoodies and things like that. You can find us on Facebook. That's where you're more likely to find all of our next upcoming gigs. We're pretty adamant about updating our Facebook regularly. It's facebook.com/Wakefire You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Bandcamp. We're all over the internet at this point. Upcoming shows we've got include Fiddler's Hearth in South Bend, Indiana on December 17th. So we'll be in Indiana then. In January, we're going to be singing at the Ancient Order of Hibernians in Detroit for their 10th anniversary celebration on January 28th. We're going to be at Nordic Fire Festival in Charlotte, Michigan in February. That's on February 24th. And then we'll have all of our St. Patrick's Day shows. The only 2 that we've got on the calendar right now are Tequila Cowboy in Pittsburgh on March 11th and Irish on Ionia in Ionia, Michigan on March 18th. But I am certain we will be filling up that entire week with various gigs. So yeah, come and see us. We love live performances. We love to see people. We would love to meet everyone. and hopefully you guys enjoy the music.
Absolutely. A lot of options for people there, and we will be checking back. You said Facebook and your website, wakefiremusic.com, for latest show details, and you can get them wherever you can get music.
All right. Thanks, guys. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us. It's a great time.
Way too much fun. See you guys next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take it easy.
So in general, these last two interviews and episodes have really make me miss Renaissance fairs.
Mm-hmm.
B, make me miss the Michigan Renaissance Festival, and really want to get involved going forward.
Yeah, for me, the music is always there. If I'm at one of the pubs, I'm listening. I will, when I'm walking around, I'm listening and I'm appreciating. I'm going to make more of an effort to sit and listen intently and watch the shows, because I think it's an area where I probably have not spent enough time appreciating it. When I'm there, I'm drinking mead, I'm watching the joust. Usually I'm there with other people and we're doing a lot of walking around and people watching and looking at costumes and things like that. But yeah, I'm gonna spend more time with music. That's my personal resolution. And the other thing that really struck me in both interviews was just how there's this really, really open, warm sentiment from the folks that are both in the bands. Then you get the sense that it kind of permeates Renaissance fairs and the folks who work at the fairs and spend a lot of time there. And that's something you can just see as a patron, but it's really great to hear people talking about it and how to, and how it really was part of what attracted them to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you go to a Renaissance fair, it's obvious how open and accepting the community is. And if you're not open and accepting, you are definitely in the minority of the fairgoers, which honestly is one of the few places in the US, at least, where I feel like people can just go be open in themselves and not worry about what other people think, which is a great thing that Renaissance fairs can offer to any community that they're just located by. It's a great time. It's great music. And hopefully, as we go forward and we do other episodes, we have other series coming up. Like our next episode, I think, is going to be more of a news-based, covering the recent news updates in media and fantasy media, from The Witcher to Rings of Power, Legend of Vox Machina. But then as we get into other seasons, I hope to come back to Renaissance fairs. Maybe we can get other people to come on and talk to us about how fairs are run, maybe more of the combat stuff. We can get some people to talk about that.
Yeah, I think, well, I know I follow on Facebook the group that puts on the jousting at the Michigan Renaissance Festival. I think they'd be interesting because that's a pretty huge commitment of time and resources, and not insignificantly dangerous. I think maybe the first or second time that I went to Renaissance Festival with Haley, one of the jousters was carted off the field after taking a pretty, a hit right to the throat with a lance. And so that whole aspect of the entertainment at Ren fairs was another interesting thing. And I'm sure it would be really interesting to see, kind of from the management perspective, how do you prepare for thousands of people, hundreds of cast members, huge space that needs to be maintained, and the kind of history of what the Michigan Renaissance Festival became, and maybe elsewhere throughout the country, what it takes to put on these events.
Yeah, I mean, Washington is 3 weekends, Michigan is 7. Like, when do you start planning? Do you start as soon as the season's over? Do you start in the spring? Yeah, there's a lot of questions we have. If you know anybody who helps manage and run a Renaissance fair, it doesn't have to be Washington or Michigan. If you are one of our listeners in Texas, or one of our listeners in the UK or Ireland, and there's Renaissance fairs over there, get us in touch with somebody.
Elves Rings Nerdy Things at gmail.com. Facebook, Elves Rings and Nerdy Things. Put us in touch. We'd love to throw a spotlight on that. Sean, what are you doing this week to be nerdy? This
week, oh man, I just bought Red Dead Redemption 2. So I started to play that. that might honestly be it. I mean,
That's
I
it.
do nerdy things pretty regularly. I might play D&D. I just got these cool coins from a Kickstarter. They are Atlantean coins. So I don't know. I go into Kickstarter every once in a while just to see if there's any nerdy thing that I want to invest in and get a reward for. So yeah, what about you?
Well, rereading Lord of the Rings, going to Greenfield Village, holiday nights. I think right now that's probably it. How's the mead going, by the way?
Have we ever talked about my mead?
I don't think so. Not on air.
Well, it's been about a year since I started making mead. My first batches were pretty bad. And then I got some pointers from a guy who actually makes mead for the Washington Renaissance Fair. And he gave me some pointers. And now I feel like I'm making adequate mead. It's very drinkable.
More than adequate. I tried some of it a couple weeks ago and it was delicious. Especially the what was the berry one?
You had the blackberry, and
blackberry.
I brought a lavender as well.
I didn't get as much of the lavender. We had a lot of folks around.
Well,
during the lavender tasting.
Yeah, my lavender is a 5-gallon batch, so I definitely have more of it. The beauty of making your own mead is pretty expensive if you go to just like Total Wine or your local establishment to get mead. It could be $30, $40 a bottle. But if you do it my way and you figure out how to make your own, it is actually pretty economical. It's pretty cheap.
Next step is just getting some bees so you can make your own honey.
Yep. Create an apiary, try to come up with my own strain for yeast.
Wow.
That's too far. I'm not going to do that.
Next step, world domination. First you get your bees, then you get your yeast, and then everybody's answering to you.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of nerdy, right?
Hell, yeah, I would say so, especially in this episode. I mean, you think about, we've talked to a couple of musicians or, a couple bands of people who are playing music in a way, at least inspired by these kind of folk traditions. And Wakefire goes into kind of the relatively more modern origin of a lot of music that we hear now that we may associate with these older traditions, but those cultures have obviously are ancient, and mead making is a very ancient activity. I would consider anything that is continuing old traditions but modifying them slightly to be Ren Fair adjacent and would classify under nerdy things. And if you're geeking out over fermentation and flavor additives, that's plenty nerdy in my book.
Well, currently I have a Christmas mead that is going to be done. It is cranberry, cinnamon stick, clove, sweet orange peel, and anise.
You had me right up until the anise.
Yeah. It's only a small amount, but I haven't back sweetened it yet, so it's still kind of bitter. But that should be done by Christmas time, and then I have a 5-gallon batch of just traditional that is currently in secondary fermentation. So, yeah, looking forward to drinking more of my mead. You have inspired me to go crack open another bottle of lavender, so I'm going to go drink that as soon as we sign off.
All right, well, enjoy that. I may have a mulled cider later this evening as I walk around between I guess it's probably the oldest that we're seeing is 16th, maybe 17th century. There's a kind of a pre-revolutionary colonial house at Greenfield Village. Yeah, we're all sorts of things on offer there, but no mead, actually.
No mead. Well, thanks for sticking with us, everybody.
All right. Until next week. See you later.
Bye-bye.